My name is Claire Henderson, and on most days, people think I have it all figured out. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office in downtown Chicago, I can see the lake shimmer like glass under the morning sun. My assistant just brought in my latte, almond milk, 2 pumps of vanilla, the usual, and somewhere behind me, my phone won't stop buzzing. I ignore it. I already know what it's about. It's been 5 years since my father's funeral. 5 years since the day my family laughed at me in front of his casket, humiliating me when I was too heartbroken to fight back. But today, that same family wants something from me. The message flashes across my screen again. Family meeting. Urgent. About Dad's estate. Estate. The word feels sharp, sterile, like the people using it. I smooth the sleeve of my silk blouse, feeling the faint tremor in my hands. No one knows that I've kept every letter my father ever wrote me, including the last one. As I look out at the skyline, my reflection stares back, a woman polished on the outside, but carrying ghosts no one else can see. All right, Dad, I whisper under my breath. I guess it's time they finally hear your last words. The memory always begins the same way, the smell of lilies, the cold press of rain against black umbrellas, and the sound of laughter that didn't belong at a funeral. My father's casket sat at the front of St. Mary's Chapel, polished walnut with gold trim. He'd always had a taste for the finer things, even in death. I stood near the front, clutching the small silver locket he'd given me when I turned 16. Inside was a note, folded so many times it had gone soft around the edges. Never let them decide your worth, Claire. That sentence was all I had left of him. Behind me, my family whispered. My cousin Melissa's voice cut through like a blade. Poor Claire. Couldn't even keep a job, and now she's pretending to be the grieving daughter. Then came a snicker from Aunt Roberta. You'd think she'd at least wear something nice for her father's funeral. That blazer looks secondhand. They weren't wrong. It was secondhand. My savings had barely covered the flight back from New York after Dad's heart attack. I remember standing there, cheeks burning, the pastor's words blurring into a dull hum. I'd lost the only person who'd ever believed in me, and all they could do was laugh. When the ceremony ended, I tried to speak. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, to honor Dad's memory, but as soon as I opened my mouth, Uncle David interrupted. So, Claire, he said, smiling like a vulture, I suppose the house goes to Roberta, the business to me, and what? You get his old books. The laughter that followed was soft but cruel, echoing inside my ribs. I wanted to scream, to tell them that Dad wasn't the kind of man to reward greed. But instead, I swallowed hard, holding the locket tight enough to leave a mark on my palm. As the rain started to pour, I turned and walked away. My heels sank into the mud, my breath shaking, but I didn't look back. I didn't have money. I didn't have anyone left. But I had that note, that promise. Never let them decide your worth. And that day, in the shadow of my father's grave, I made myself a vow. They would never laugh at me again. The first few months after the funeral were a blur of rejection emails, instant ramen, and tears I refused to admit were still about him. I rented a room in Queens barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk, working part-time at a bookstore during the day and designing websites at night for anyone who would pay $50. Sometimes, I'd touch the locket when I felt like giving up. That single folded note, never let them decide your worth, felt heavier than gold. One evening, while restocking paperbacks, I met Evelyn Shaw, a publishing executive who came in looking for a rare poetry book. I found it for her, wrapped it in tissue, and before leaving, she asked, "Do you do design work?" I told her about my freelance projects. She smiled and handed me her card. "Send me your portfolio. I have a feeling you're underselling yourself." That moment changed everything. Evelyn became my first real client, and later, my mentor. She didn't coddle me, she challenged me. She taught me how to build a brand, negotiate contracts, and stand in a room full of men without shrinking. "You have a gift, Claire," she said once over coffee. "But gifts mean nothing if you don't charge what you're worth." So I started my own agency, Lark Digital Media, from that tiny room. At first, I designed websites for small boutiques and indie authors. Then came tech startups, then national brands. I worked 16-hour days, learned code, marketing, and public speaking from scratch. Every milestone, first major client, first paycheck over $10,000, first office space, felt surreal. There were nights when exhaustion won, when I'd cry into cold takeout, wondering if Dad would even recognize me now. But each time doubt crept in, I'd remember his voice, calm and certain. You're meant for more than they can see. When I could finally afford to move, I bought a small apartment in Chicago, overlooking the lake. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. I furnished it slowly, one meaningful piece at a time. A framed photo of Dad fishing, a shelf of vintage poetry, a marble desk I assembled myself. Evelyn was the only one who knew how far I'd come.
My family didn't need to.
On social media, I posted sunsets, coffee cups, and books, never boardrooms or luxury trips. Let them think I was still struggling. Let them underestimate me. Because someday, I knew I'd walk back into their world, not as the girl they mocked, but as the woman they'd never see coming. And when that day arrived, they'd finally understand what my father's last words truly meant. 5 years after the funeral, the email came from a law firm in Boston. Subject: Final reading of the estate of Mr. Richard Henderson. I stared at the screen for a full minute, the taste of old bitterness returning to my tongue. The estate had already been divided, or so they'd told me. Apparently, my father's will contained an addendum that hadn't been read due to pending conditions. Conditions I was suddenly needed to witness. By the time I arrived at the Henderson family home, the air was thick with perfume, greed, and fake sympathy. The same laughter from that awful day echoed faintly down the marble hallway. Melissa was first to spot me. "Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter," she smirked, sipping champagne. "Surprised you could afford the trip, Claire." I smiled lightly. "Let's just say things have improved." The lawyer, Mr. Whitley, a tall, silver-haired man, motioned for everyone to take their seats around the long oak table. The same table where my father used to host Sunday dinners, before money and pride split us apart. He cleared his throat. "As you know, Mr. Henderson's will was executed 5 years ago. However, the following sealed letter, marked to be read upon fulfillment of my final wishes, has only now been authorized for disclosure." A murmur rippled through the room. Aunt Roberta leaned forward, clutching her pearls. Mr. Whitley unfolded the letter carefully, his voice steady but somber. "To my family, if you are hearing this, it means 5 years have passed. I wanted time to see who would honor my legacy and who would only chase what I left behind. Claire, if you're here, I trust you've done what I always believed you could." My heart thudded. I built Henderson Holdings from nothing. I taught you all that value isn't inherited, it's earned. That's why, as of today, my remaining assets, including the house and the business shares, transfer under the full discretion of my daughter, Claire Henderson. The silence was instant and absolute. Uncle David's jaw dropped. Melissa nearly spilled her drink. Roberta stammered, That can't be right." Mr. Whitley adjusted his glasses. "It's very clear, ma'am. All remaining assets fall under Ms. Henderson's legal control. She may distribute or withhold them as she deems appropriate." Every pair of eyes turned toward me. For a moment, I just sat there, calm, hands folded in my lap. The same woman they mocked for her cheap blazer and shaky voice now held everything they'd clawed for. "I guess Dad finally got the last laugh," I said quietly. Melissa's face flushed red. "You don't deserve this. You left. You." "I left because you made sure there was no place for me here," I interrupted. My voice was even deliberate. "Dad saw who you all were. That's why he trusted me instead." The lawyer handed me a folder. "Ms. Henderson, here are the transfer documents. Once you sign, the holdings are officially yours." The pen felt cool between my fingers. As the ink touched paper, the power shifted completely. I rose slowly, glancing at the portraits on the wall. My father's eyes seemed almost alive in the painting above the fireplace. "Dad always said money shows character," I said softly. I think today proved him right. No one spoke. No one dared. For years, they'd laughed at me for being small, quiet, broke. But the silence that followed now was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The meeting room felt different now, quieter, heavier. Even the air seemed to recognize the shift in power. I looked around at the faces that once sneered at me, now pale and tight with fear. Uncle David cleared his throat first. "Claire, you have to understand, your father didn't mean for you to." I cut him off with a raised hand. "You think I don't know what my father meant? He left it all to me because he knew what greed looks like. He saw it in this room long before I did."
Melissa scoffed. "So, what now?"
"You'll keep everything? Leave us with nothing." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs.
"No."
"I'm not like you, Melissa. But I also won't hand anything over for free. You all taught me the price of respect. Now you'll learn the value of earning it." I reached into my bag and took out a neatly typed list, something I'd prepared the moment I saw that lawyer's email. "These are my conditions." Their eyes widened. "Uncle David," I began, meeting his gaze, "Dad gave you a business that thrived on underpaying people who trusted you. I'll let you keep your position if you raise wages, hire fairly, and put 10% of profits into a local education fund. Do that for 2 years, and I'll sign the company back over." He nodded stiffly, shame clouding his face. "Aunt Roberta," I continued, "you've lived your whole life off other people's money. The house Dad gave you is falling apart because you never cared for it. I'll restore it, but it becomes a community home for foster girls aging out of the system. You can live there too if you help manage it." She blinked rapidly, speechless. Then I turned to Melissa, the cousin who'd laughed the loudest. "You always said I'd end up alone. Maybe you were right for a while. But I built something from nothing, and I did it with integrity. You want a share of Dad's trust? Prove you can stand on your own for once. Get a real job. No handouts. A year from now, if you can show stability, I'll help you start your own business." Her lips trembled, but no words came. "This isn't revenge," I said finally, my tone soft but unyielding. "It's redemption if you choose it. Dad believed in second chances.
"So do I.
But they're not free." I gathered the papers, sliding them into the folder. "You all wanted an inheritance. I'm offering you something better, character. Do something meaningful with it." And for the first time, I saw it in their eyes, something I'd never seen before. Not mockery, not pity, respect. A month later, I returned to my father's grave for the first time since that awful day. The air was crisp with early autumn, and the maple trees around the cemetery had started to turn gold. I stood there in silence, the locket cool against my skin, the same one that had carried me through every heartbreak and every triumph. I traced my fingers over his name carved into the stone. Richard Allen Henderson, beloved father, builder of dreams. "Hey, Dad," I whispered. "I did it. You were right, they finally saw who they really are." Since that meeting, things had begun to shift. Uncle David sent me a photo of the new scholarship banner hanging outside his company, the Henderson Opportunity Fund. He didn't say much, just, "You were right. Thank you." Aunt Roberta had written too. Her tone was softer now. She said she'd started working with the girls at the foster home, teaching them to sew, just like she once taught me when I was little. And Melissa, she was the surprise. I saw her post online, smiling behind a cafe counter. "First day as manager," the caption read. For once, her laughter didn't sting. It looked real. I smiled through tears I didn't bother to wipe away. Standing there, I thought about that rainy funeral day, about the weight of their laughter, and the way I'd walked away with nothing but a promise. That promise had become the foundation of everything I was now. I opened the locket and unfolded the worn note once more. The edges were frayed, but the words still shone clear as sunlight. "Never let them decide your worth." I closed it gently and whispered, "You didn't just destroy their inheritance, Dad. You rebuilt me." As I walked back to my car, the breeze caught my hair, carrying the faint scent of lilies. I looked toward the horizon, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Because in the end, I realized the real inheritance wasn't the money, or the company, or even the power. It was the strength to walk away from their laughter and never look back. Bottom of form.